I'm going to record on. Should say it to everyone. If it doesn't say it, recording is on now. Excellent. This is the NLT Trust Study Group first session, April 10th. So the question is, how do we receive funds into our trust? And in particular, it's coming from a beneficiary, which is slightly unusual. Normally, the grantor or the settlor is the one who's going to contribute something to the trust corpus. But when a beneficiary has given you a donation into the trust, I'll make a note to make sure that Randall gives us specifics on it. But my understanding is what we do is we can do a gift letter that the beneficiary is gifting it into the trust, or they're giving us that in exchange for units of beneficial interest. So in other words, they will then become an official beneficiary if they weren't already. So you can do, there is a addendum to Schedule A that Randall has given us, and the addendum to Schedule A gives you an opportunity to describe what the person has given you. Then you can list their name. You don't necessarily have to give them a title, but put their name, they sign it, and then you as the trustee are going to receive it into the trust. And the fact that it's written in your name, I don't know if your bank, you'll have to ask your bank if they'll be able to deposit it into the trust or not. If they write it into your name and then you put comma TTEE, that usually means to you as a trustee, but it is best if they want it to go into the trust that it actually says the trust name on it. Does that make sense?
Right. No, absolutely. So really the letter would be key there.
Yes. Right? And the addendum to Schedule A brings it into the trust corpus and makes it a part of the original principal assets of the trust rather than income of the trust. And we want as much as possible for our real property and our assets to come in as part of the original corpus of the trust.
Right.
If I
yes.
get,
Squeeze my hand if you're okay. Squeeze it.
Oh, squeeze. Thank you.
Yeah.
When I get unusual amounts of noise, I will mute everyone, and then you just have to unmute yourself. Hello, I've just admitted a whole bunch of more people to our trust study group. Welcome, welcome. So what I have done, just quick backwards, if you go into the chat, I have put a spreadsheet that I'm trying to share with everyone to help educate us all on how to manage our trusts. And I'm so sorry, I believe that it was that Xavier who was asking the question about how to take in funds from a beneficiary? You can just hit, yes, there you are. So did that answer your question?
Yes. If you did open up the trust, though, with money from one of the trustees, is that an issue?
No, it's not a problem. Quite frequently, the settlor will even be a nominee, and that funds are being brought into the trust from various sources. But as much as possible, we try to make it so that it's titled into the trust. So if someone's going to make a contribution to the trust, that they write the check in the name of the trust, or if it's cash, or obviously if it's real property, it's going to be retitled into the name of the trust. So using that addendum A works really well, and if necessary, you can back it up with a gift letter explaining that the person who gave the funds to the trust or gave the property to the trust is doesn't have any, is relinquishing all rights, is not expecting anything in return.
Exactly, especially because the beneficiaries are none of the trustees, so that's absolutely fine. Right?
Correct.
Okay, perfect.
And Randall explains this a little bit, and we'll go into it more because we're going to be studying passing the buck. And so we're going to be studying very detailed, how do you really run these more complex trusts. And when we study that, we're going to get into the difference between beneficial units and also trust capital units. And for right now, to keep our trust as simple as possible, Randall has issued all of our trusts with 100 units of beneficial interest. And that will help us keep things in a simpler fashion. So of everyone who has newly joined us, double checking, I think we're all in. We have 17 participants. Looks like one person was on a telephone. So the person on the telephone, to unmute yourself, you're going to hit *6 to mute and to unmute. And everyone has the ability to
I know. Relax. Relax.
Ow! Ow, my.
Everyone has the ability to unmute themselves, but I'm just asking that if it gets noisy, I just real quickly hit mute all, and then if you're speaking, you have to unmute yourself. So it's a little bit of the technicality of how do you create a safe room.
How am I good enough for everybody? How am I good?
The image is not in focus.
Yes.
Ow!
Okay, there's one person who has very loud noise in the background. I'm going to see if I can
Oh my God.
knock that off. Is that better? Okay. The gentleman who said the image is not in focus, I know the graphics is not coming through as nicely as I was hoping. So I'm giving everyone a copy of the spreadsheet in the Dropbox link in the chat room. So I'm going to put this in there for you again. So if you click on the Dropbox link, you will be able to download the Excel sheet that I'm using to help teach this first class. So, and if it's disconcerting, just don't look at your screen for a little while and listen to me. I'm going to talk to you for a little bit about how to manage your trust. So inside this trust document log, what I've done is I've organized it by the documents that Randall has given us. So for some of us, we only have a trust abstract, a memorandum of irrevocable trust, an addendum Schedule A, a letter of authority if anyone is attending a meeting to perhaps exchange currency, and those documents put together are the trust abstract that is then getting notarized. So if you have a full trust, you have your trust indenture, you have at the end of the trust indenture, your settlor or nominee settlor is acknowledging it and signing the document. You have an acceptance by the trust of the first trustee. Then you have the first trustee or the settlor is nominating a second trustee or a successor trustee. And the reason for this is, yes, technically we can have a trust with just 3 people, a grantor settlor, a trustee, and a beneficiary. But when you go to do banking or any kind of business with someone, they want to know that there is a second person in line, that the trustee isn't the only person who's representing the trust. So that's the importance of either nominating a second trustee or having a successor trustee. And some people, I'm going to admit one more person. Hello, Vicki. I have everyone on mute off. And if you want to unmute yourself, you can either unmute on your computer or hit *6. So the reason for the trustee being having a secondary trustee or a successor trustee. And the secondary trustee, some people have asked, we call it an adverse trustee, and that just means somebody that's not related. It's not related by blood, by marriage, by employment to the original settlor and or the beneficiaries. You want to make sure that there's diversity in there. And if anyone has any additional questions, there's a really good seminar that Randall did where he addresses the grantor, settlor, the trustee, and the beneficiary and explains their relationship. So I recommend re-listening to his. So the document log that I created, when you go across the top of it, we have the date for the documents. We have the trust binder, the sections that you're going to file things in. And what I recommend for people is that you file some things in multiple places. So for example, Randall has suggested that we have section 3 is for our banking paperwork. The banking paperwork includes copies of minutes, and it will also include either Schedule A or an addendum Schedule A listing out the asset that you put into the bank. So you can put copies of all that together in your banking section, but then if it's an addendum to Schedule A, I would put it in Section 2 so that you have appointments and schedules. And then I would also put the board meeting minutes that give you permission to do the banking. I would put a copy of that in your Section 5 with your board minutes. So that's what the third column of the spreadsheet is for, is so that you know where is it filed in your binder. The next one, this is how I like to follow my documents. I make a note who signed it. Maybe it's notarized, the date that happened, because sometimes your documents are generated on one date and your people are signing it on another date. And that way you know what the date that has occurred. Then if it's a complicated action, you can keep some notes here about the action that you've taken. The next thing I've done is, if you just put an X or some notation in board minutes, Schedule A, Schedule B, Schedule C, if you put notes here, this will help you so you can filter and more easily do a board minute at the end of the year and note the activity that you have done in the year. And these other columns where I have income, expenses, liabilities, and other notes, these are going to make more sense when we look at the trust financial ledger. So do you have any quick questions right now on a spreadsheet? I know that perhaps spreadsheets are a little bit unusual for people to use to manage an organization, but it does make keeping your binder much more organized, and it keeps all in one place the activities of your trust. Iona, I just admitted you to the meeting. You can unmute yourself, *6 if you're on your phone, or unmute yourself by the Zoom bar where you hit the mute and unmute. So in the chat room, does anyone have any questions they either want to post as a chat, or there's also the ability to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask a question. And so far we have 18 participants. That's really awesome. So can someone just mention in the chat room, does it make sense, the document that you're looking at the trust document log?
Honestly, Dominique, some things do straightforward, but there's some things I do not understand.
Go for it.
Like, for instance, trust financial ledger.
Yes,
Just
that's
we're
going to work on that one next. If everyone's ready, I'm going to jump to that. Let's go. All right. So the trust financial ledger. So this document is crafted so that you could print it out and give it to another trustee, or if you had to summarize something for a beneficiary where they requested to know something, you would have the information at your fingertips to be able to respond correctly about the finances of your trust. And I'm so sorry about the blurry. I agree. That's why I'm giving everybody the Dropbox link. I'm right next to my internet server, but it's still blurry, so I'll have to figure out with Zoom how to make it so it's not so blurry. So if you open up the tab that says Trust Financial Ledger, what I've done at the top is just some basic notes so you can put down the basics of your trust. I've also made a note, actually if you pull it a little bit, in the date report created, that's just a formula. The formula is equal now, and then parentheses, brackets. That way, if you hit print, you know what date your report got printed on. So the way this works is, it's basically watching what would go on a balance sheet and watching what would go on a profit and loss statement. So it contains all the information that would actually be on a financial statement. So the first thing you would start with is the date. The second is the description. Reference is whatever you want to reference. Is it an invoice that you're paying? Is it money that you've taken into your trust? You reference it however you want to reference it so that you know the backup to the entry that's happening. So this is very simple bookkeeping. Schedule C is just a reminder note that you could enter in right here. You could enter in the beneficiaries that you have, just so you remember who is it that this trust is taking care of. The next, we're talking about funds that are going into our trust, and this is our corpus. So the first would be, on my trust, I put in $21, so I put $21 down. The second thing is the trust indenture, I paid $2,500, $2,500 for it, so that's actually an asset. So for me, I went ahead and put it down as an asset. The difference between personal property and real property is a little bit vague, but basically, real property is the stuff that can't move, like a piece, your house, a piece of land, real estate, whereas personal property is more like cash or currency or something else, copyright, something that has more mobility to it. You would list under personal property, and in particular, if it came from the grantor, you would list on Schedule A. So the next, I just left in here. I don't know how we're going to move forward with things, but there is a possibility that your trust might take a loan. So I just put it in here so you know monies come in on this side, monies are going to go out on the back side. So the next is any addendums to Schedule A or addendums to Schedule B. That's fine. Now you know where it is. And for right now, I'm recommending that any gifts that you take into your trust, it's with no strings attached. We're keeping our trust really simple. Perhaps they're already a beneficiary, but you have to decide how you're going to handle things. I've set it up as though the grantor has decided who the beneficiaries are, and if there's any other gift, it's getting exchanged in as a gift. If there's any other donation of currency or assets to the trust. So the next, Schedule D, has to do with income, because eventually all of our trusts are going to be doing something that's going to be bringing in income into the trust, because that's how we're going to care for our beneficiaries. So in the future, you'll figure out you're either running a business or you're caring for property that perhaps is getting rent. We'll be discussing various ways that our trusts are going to be earning income and bringing in more assets to benefit the beneficiaries. So I like to keep a total of currency, so I know, is it cash on hand or is it cash in the bank? I know very quickly, what do I have on hand? And the next one is total assets received. So the basis of accounting is really simple. Your assets equal your liability plus equity. Super, super simple. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. And accounting gets kind of fancy, and based upon whether it's a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC or a nonprofit or a trust, it may describe these three things in a slightly different way or use different words, but the foundation is the same. Whenever you are dealing with an entity, its financial reflection is assets equal liabilities plus equity. So the next part of this spreadsheet is simply our trust expenses. And what I did on the spreadsheet, just to go back for a second, I tried to make some notes from Randall's trust manual that he gave us if we have questions about what are trust expenses. It's really important. We must keep our personal expenses separate from our trust. So we're talking about if the trust has an office, it will have some rental expenses. If it has a loan, it would have interest payments. If it owns property, it has property taxes. It may be repairing the property. There may be insurances on the property. But you can see how you really, as a trustee, you are caring for the assets that you hold for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So you're very careful that the only things the trust is going to pay for is something that is truly a trust expense. So given that, what I did in the chart is I just started listing some miscellaneous things, and you can change anything. Everything about this Excel sheet is all available for you to make it your own. Someone had a quick question. How about if you wanted to invest in carrot bars? So that is just a different way of holding a currency, and the currency is in gold. So that you could very easily, do you see where I have subtotal of currency received? You could add another column if you want to keep track of your gold separately. Just insert another column and you can keep track of that separately, but it will be a part of your total assets received. And you could have a subtotal for just the asset that you hold as gold. So not a problem. You can add in to the columns any additional assets that you have, and just make sure that when you get to total assets received, you just have it add in there. And you know that your spreadsheet is in balance when you go up to the top and you're just looking, my assets should equal my liabilities plus my equity. And if anyone has problems with the spreadsheet and they're really interested in getting this to work right for them, I am happy to help you out with this, because I really love Excel and I find it very easy to organize lots of complex data. I ran a $34 million construction project using Excel sheets, and I never went on to the job site. So I'm an Excel lover. So back to the spreadsheet. I tried to keep green for money. So that's all assets and monies coming in. Yes, someone asked, can you run this on Numbers? Numbers is a different Excel-ish program, spreadsheet program. Yes, you can run it on there. You can also run it on Google Spreadsheets. I would recommend Google Spreadsheets over Numbers, just because I don't have much experience with Numbers. And next time we meet, I might actually just throw this all into Google and see if that's an easier way for us all to screen share and look at it. That's a really good suggestion, possibility. So after the green columns that have to do with assets, we have an orange column that has to do with our trust expenses. And I want you to notice I've actually put a schedule on it, because when we do our board minutes, we can more easily consolidate various activities if we just list them real quickly in a schedule. So in your board minutes at the end of the year, you could say board expenses were blank, give a total, and say see Schedule E, and then very quickly you could format this Excel sheet so that you just print just the items that show up for Schedule E, and there you go. You've got a document, a financial document to add to your board minutes. So what do we have there? Bank charges, phone, stationery, vehicle expense, possible, trustee fees, if you have any, internet, perhaps, just any other trust expenses. And you can add additional columns or subtract. It's user-friendly. Make it your own. So at the end, I wanted you to know I made a place for a loan coming in, so I also made a place for a loan going out. And a loan is actually something that it shows up on the balance sheet. But this is sort of a cash flow as well as holding your financial picture. So I want you to understand the loan money comes in, and then the loan money would go out. The next thing we have is we're going to be taking care of our beneficiaries. So we want to make sure that we track our beneficiaries' disbursements. So anything that we do for them that affects the assets of the trust needs to be recorded here. But if you do something else for them that is just time as a beneficiary, you could make a note of that and include that in the board minutes. You'll have to decide how you want to handle that. So the last thing is just watching. I like to watch my total currency that's dispersed. So I'm watching my checkbook. The currency balance. So total currency dispersed means this is the total of all the expenses that you've paid. Your currency balance is taking your currency asset and subtracting what you've paid. That gives you your balance. And then in your board minutes, you can note total assets less currency dispersed. That gives you your total assets, because your total assets, if you've got $100 cash and you pay out $50, you only have $50 left. So now you have the basis of your financial picture. You have your total assets. If you have any liabilities, you can list them. and your liabilities plus your equity equal your assets. Does that make sense? And let's see, someone had a question about spending cash on beneficiaries. Try as best you can to either use a debit card or use a check, because now you have a paper trail. So if you do use cash for beneficiary, I would make a note of it on a piece of paper and have the beneficiary sign off that they received that from you, so that you can properly document that you gave them cash. And yes, you can enter cash into this, not a problem. Any other questions? Hello, we have a few more people who just entered the meeting. Just want to let you know, I have everyone on mute, but you can unmute yourself by hitting *6 or unmuting on your phone. And we are recording this so that we can all share this information in the future. Let's see. And for the people who just joined, I've put a copy of the spreadsheet that I'm sharing in Dropbox so that everyone has a copy of it. And the idea is that everyone, if you enjoy it and it makes sense to you, you make it your own and make use of it. So since we had a number of people just join the meeting, very quickly, I want to go over the first thing that's on your spreadsheet is a document log. And we have just reviewed a trust financial ledger. And there will be a copy of this recording for the future, so you'll be able to review it. So if anyone, let me see if there's more questions. What if you want to do an online purchase for beneficiary as well as investing? Does the online account have to be in the trust name? Very good question. So for investments that the trust holds, that should be in the trust name. If the trust wants to purchase something for behalf of a beneficiary, the trust would go on Amazon under the trust's Amazon account, order the item, and it gets shipped to a beneficiary. Does that make sense? We want as much as possible for every action that the trust takes, the action should be taken in the name of the trust. And we want as much as possible all the assets that the trust is caring for, they all need to be in the name of the trust. So that would be bank accounts, investments, property, copyrights. Any other questions? And I apologize, I was hoping that we could all just simply be unmuted and just all chat, but there are a couple people who I don't think they realize that their sound's on and there's a little too much noise, so you'll have to unmute yourself if you want to speak a question. So after the document log and the trust financial ledger, the next thing, oops, we have two more people. Hello, hello. Hello, welcome. You're in the Natural Law Trustee Study Group. We're recording the call, and I have in the chat a copy of the spreadsheet. So I'm hoping that you will be able to go on Dropbox, download the spreadsheet, and then listen to this recording of the study group later on, so you'll get a walkthrough of how this Excel sheet works. So we've talked about the document log, we've talked about the trust financial letter. The next thing that I'd like to talk about, just to check in, are there any other questions that people have regarding anything about their trust paperwork that they have? And if I don't see anything, because my goal is that we will have this meeting once a month, the week before Randall does his free seminar meeting, and the questions that we all can't figure out amongst ourselves, we would be able to propose them to Randall, and then hopefully he would be able to answer them in the following week. So there's a question. So how do you handle purchases such as crypto and carrot bars where they don't accept trust? Yeah, that's a tricky one. So I was talking to, trying to think of the gentleman's name down in, I think it's Temecula, Derek. I was talking with Derek, and the trick about the carrot bars is they do have to, right now, because of the know your customer laws, they do have to have an actual person purchase the gold. But you can make the trust a beneficiary. So I was going to speak with a financial advisor to find out more, but Tunson suggested something very interesting. He said that the carrot bars are very private, so it's not getting reported to any agency. And right now, it could be that holding at least a little bit of assets as a person with the trust as the beneficiary may work for you, but I don't have enough accounting knowledge or financial, legal knowledge to know the ins and outs of that. But that is the difficulty right now with the carrot bars, is that know your customer rules require them to have a live person purchase the gold. Let's see. Here's a question. Can I set up more than one bank account in my trust for separate currencies? Absolutely. You can have as many bank accounts and investment accounts as you need to care for the assets of the trust. And yes, so the funds come into the trust, they come into an account, and then you decide to set up either another bank account where those funds are going into, or perhaps you decide to set up a whole nother trust. And perhaps the first trust you have will be the manager of a different trust that is holding an asset in a different way. That is perfectly fine. So someone asked the question, but what if the funds are coming from the trust? Yes, that is perfectly fine. A trust can trade one asset for another. When you get a chance to read your trust indenture, and even in the memorandum of the trust, it says that the trustee has the ability to contract and do anything in regards to the assets that are for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So if you decide that your cash in one bank would be doing better to be an investment in another financial institution, the trust would write itself a check from one trust account to another trust account. Does that make sense? We have two more people who just joined us. We are reviewing a spreadsheet of notes, which I have put in the chat room as a Dropbox. And you'll have a chance to listen to this study group in the future, so you'll be able to get a walkthrough of how that Excel sheet works. So thank you for joining us. A person asked, what lists of banks will open accounts for trust? So I was successful in opening a trust account with my community bank. It's a local small bank. I live in Santa Barbara. And I researched them. They are locally funded. I really like that. And they specialized in helping nonprofits and trusts. So they understood trust. So you may have to, Randall has mentioned this to us, you may have to go to a couple of different banks to find someone who is comfortable with opening a trust account. But normally, if you use the paperwork that Randall has put together for us as our banking paperwork, or if you have an unactivated trust, the trust abstract, if you use those documents, you shouldn't have any problem opening a trust if that banking management understands how to handle trusts. So I would start with your local community banks. And just for your information, when I opened my bank account with my local bank, they asked me to sign their certification of trust form, and I read it over. It was very simple. I was able to check off the boxes that clearly defined me as an irrevocable trust. So I felt comfortable using their document, but you kind of have to walk through that. You really have to understand, read your certification of trust minutes and understand your trust, so that when you're talking to your banking people and your banking managers, you present as a knowledgeable trustee. So someone asked, do all documents have to be notarized? Randall's done something really beautiful. When he titles a bunch of papers all together and he calls it a trust abstract, inside that trust abstract, he's listing every document that's in there. It could have your executive manager agreement in there. It could have your banking resolution. It can have your certification of trust. And at the very end of it, you could take the entire document to a notary and say, hey, here's a document. It's a trust abstract. I need my signature notarized. And the notary would have no problem notarizing, and that would cover certifying your signature on all the documents that are contained within that trust abstract. So you only have to get notarized your signature just one time. And in the question of, do the documents have to be notarized? I actually took my documents not notarized to my bank, but I went with my second trustee, and we asked for their notary to sign our trust certification, and they had no problem. So the reason for those documents being notarized is the notary is the one who is looking at your license and letting everyone know who has to deal with your paperwork that, yes, you are who you say you are, as you have signed for an entity. So that's the reason for that notarization. And the reason why we're all notarizing, in particular, our addendum A's, is because, yes, if we have any currencies, we're listing our name on it, but we're also noting the time that we gave those currencies to our trust, so that if anyone's participating in any kind of revaluation, you have a history that those currencies are in your trust before any revaluation occurs. One person has mentioned the bank only requires the first memorandum to be notarized. Perfect. But if you put it all together as a trust abstract and you have your notary attached to the whole thing, that works. My one point is, when you're with the bank, you don't give them any more information than what you need to give, and you definitely do not give who your beneficiaries are. That is private information. Let's see. Bev, one more person admitted. We have 27 participants. That's exciting. Bev, if you go to the chat, you will find, and I don't know if you see the history of the chat, that's why I keep reposting it. You'll find a document that I created, a spreadsheet, for you to help manage your trust. And when you get a chance to re-listen to this recording, you'll learn about the document log and the trust financial ledger. So in future meetings, when people who came in late, if you have additional questions, we can catch up on them. Not a problem. So here's a quick disclaimer for everyone who's on the call, that we are all studying together. It's not intended as legal or financial advice. I'm not an attorney or a CPA. We're all researching together because we're sharing open source information, and that this is a private exchange between us for personal and educational purposes, and we're all covered under protection of freedom of speech. Woohoo! So someone commented, I had to provide the names of beneficiaries in order to open a bank account. I would have gone to a different bank, Shirley, and if necessary, you may want to close that account and go to a different bank. Your beneficiaries are private information. They should not have access to that. If any financial institution makes you queasy of being too nosy about what you're doing, just quietly close it down and go find someone else who respects your privacy. And this is a really, how can I say this? Look at this as a very fun, lifelong learning thing that we are all embarking on. So I have made just about every mistake you can think of in regards to owning companies. I've been in legal disputes. I've lost companies. I've been divorced. I have basically told people, there's very few legal documents that I haven't seen before. I've also worked for the federal government, the Department of Interior, the Army Corps of Engineers. I've seen an incredible amount of documents in private sector as well as public sector. And really, the way that we hold our trust is to make ourselves as knowledgeable as possible. Don't stick your head in the sand. When you don't have an answer about something, keep asking until you're able to find the answer. And if it doesn't feel right to you that it's a good answer, keep asking. Because one thing that I want you all to really understand is that Randall has gifted us with a trust that is a complex combination of an irrevocable trust, an accumulation trust, complex trust, yes, insurance trust, inter vivos trust, private trust, modified spendthrift trust, maintenance trust, and family trust. So we'll read things on the internet and we'll share things with each other, and many different things will apply or things won't apply based upon how we're choosing to run our trust. But our trust indenture has made it possible for us to do many, many things for the benefit of our beneficiaries. And that's part of why I asked if we could kindly come together and do a trust study group, because there is just so much to be studied and so much to be learned. Has anyone gotten or procured the Pets in the Buck books from Charles Author and dove into the art of being a trustee? Just curious. It's on our list to start studying, not next month, but the following month. We'll start with 2 chapters a month. And the nice thing about how that book is laid out is it takes you through in a story format. So it explains it with living examples so that you can understand the various laws or the various best management practices that are being engaged in to properly manage a trust. So it's really an amazing read, but it is a read. So we'll get into it. Someone has unmuted themselves. Do you have a question?
Yes, not being on a computer, is it possible to get your documents sent to me so I can see the forms and how to manage it all?
Absolutely. I will email this link to Peter, and I will make sure that he sends an email when he sends out a copy of the recording, that he sends out a copy of the spreadsheet to everyone as well. Thank you for asking that.
The document log in the ledger?
Yes. So I have a document lodge, a ledger. I have notes. I have useful software programs that I use. And I have a list of the trust education books that I've been trying to read, reference, and enjoy. And so it'll be the basis of our study group. So yes, that will all be there for you. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much.
So in Randall's trust manual, he goes through the basics of what the trust is. He goes through the basics of, I'm going through my notes really fast. He goes through the basics of what the trust is, how we establish it, and how we pull monies in. When you someone asks the question, can a trust act as a business? Yes, in this way. Our trust is going to be performing actions that will generate income for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So there is a legal technicality of trusts that are, quote, business trusts that the IRS wants to tax. And so we're all going to be working, especially as our trusts get funded for humanitarian purposes. Yay! We're all going to be working with financial advisors, and those advisors are going to help us so that the activity of our trusts are engaged in a way that we benefit from the least amount of taxes paid as possible, because I feel it's our civic duty to care for ourselves, our community, our beneficiaries, and not support the war machine. So when you ask, can a trust act as a business? What I'm currently doing, just to share, I have an LLC, and my trust is a member of my LLC. So my trust is receiving income as a member, but it's not actually doing any action. So I would recommend, that's kind of a broad question of can a trust act as a business? I would recommend take that specific situation that you're talking about and craft it as a question that we can pose to Randall and listen to him describe that situation so that it is, the trust is engaged in a way that protects it from tax consequences. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Excellent. So if you have not taken time to read Randall's trust manual, I highly recommend it. Just take your time, slowly pour over it. He has so much really good information in here. After discussing how to establish the trust, he has listed everything that's inside the trust indenture. So if you only have the trust abstract, I believe he's given you a copy of his trust manual, and you will see what else is going to be included in your actual trust instrument, which is your indenture. Randall discusses transferring property into the trust, discusses the duration of the trust, and then walks through the key people and talks about the creator, grantor, settlor, us as trustees, the non-related trustee, that's the adverse trustee, non-related, adverse. Adverse just means if you're non-related, you have the ability to say no. And that's very important for the trust, that the trustee is able to say no to the grantor and is able to say no, say a beneficiary requests something from you and it's not a good thing. The trustee has to be able to say no. And I'm sorry for pausing every now and then. I'm adjusting so I can see everything. Randall also discussed units of beneficial interest. And just remember, we have 100. So if you have a situation where you have already designated the 100 units and you have someone else as the grantor, you have someone else who you want to be a beneficiary, what I did was, I was originally a beneficiary of my trust, and I gave away some of my trust units to someone else that I wanted to be a beneficiary. So on the beneficiary register, which is our Schedule C, you'll see at the bottom of it, it has a place where it talks about when there's a change in the beneficial units. And you just adjust the register. You make a notation that this certificate is void, it gets reissued, and how did that change happen? What units went to what person? And you document it. And then at the end of the year, it'll be one of those wonderful news items for your board minutes, your trustee board minutes. So we have units of beneficial interest. Then he talks about the trustee powers. And it's the reason why we're all together in this group is because being a trustee is very, very, very important. If we don't handle things properly, we can lose all of our assets. So we have to make sure that we document everything, that all the assets are in the name of the trust, that our trust is funded If you haven't opened a bank account yet, but your Schedule A or addendum to Schedule A says $21, please set aside that $21 into a special place. Now your trust is funded. If you have not exchanged an asset into the name of the trust does not exist yet. So it's very important as a trustee that we make sure these activities happen. With selling and exchanging or dealing with trust property, we, the trustee, we, in the name of the trust, signing TTEE as trustee, we hold the title. We hold it for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And then on the meeting of trust, what is recommended is that we at least meet once a year. Preferably, I think that people should meet twice a year. It can be a phone call. It can be a Skype meeting. It can be a face-to-face meeting. But you need to have the trustees have a meeting and document their conversation, because that body of paperwork in that binder is your trust entity. And that's how you're proving the existence and activity of your trust if something were to occur later on down the line where someone questions you about one of your actions. Randall lists out what can happen with a trustee. Perhaps your trustee needs to be removed for whatever reason. They're not fulfilling their duties. There is a document at the end of our trust called a protector document, and it's where the settlor grantor can set up someone who has the ability to fire a trustee if the trustee is not behaving in the best interest of the beneficiaries. So, or we all understand being a trustee is an at-will agreement. So we have a choice. If we decide that perhaps we're a trustee for a friend or someone else, and we decide, wow, it's too much work and I'm not able to do it, we would talk to the other trustee, we would help find someone to take our place, and we can resign. This is an at-will agreement. Let's see. Hiring and paying caretakers. So there will be a point where we hire people to do things for our trust. And what is highly recommended is that we put everything in writing. So if you're hiring someone, say the trust has taken ownership of a piece of property and you're hiring landscapers to care for it, have a contract. Have it in the trust name. The person signs a contract of what they're doing for you, and then the trust pays that person. So it's just advisable that anytime that we hire someone to do something for the trust, it's always in writing. And then it's really wonderful. Randall has also included how to generate our board minutes. So one of the things that I did on the document log, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, I put his notes about how to do a board minutes. Basically, you're putting the name of your trust, you're putting the date, you're calling it a board minute, and if you include all these items that he listed in his trust manual, you're covered. You sign it, and you talk about all those things, and you're good. You can even list something and say, decisions and actions taken on any old business. You can say, none. But you've listed that it was a topic for discussion that you reviewed. And this all helps document the activities of your trust. So what I recommend with this spreadsheet is anytime you find out a really great idea of something that you feel will help you be a really good trustee, put a note here so that you remind yourself how you want to handle something. So let's see. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm going to look real fast. We have 27 participants. Is all of this making sense? Are you finding it useful? Awesome. Don't be overwhelmed. If you are not a spreadsheet kind of using person, You can even simply take the ideas that I'm presenting and rework it for yourself. What you want to do is you want to create your own way of handling your trust. But the two most important things that you need to know is the documents that you have and when they were signed, and you need to know what are your finances, how's your finances set up. And in the future, I'm going to actually do a little bit with a CPA that specializes in trust management and get a sample spreadsheet, or pardon me, a sample financial statement, so that I'll present to everyone the words that GAAP uses in order to describe properly for a trust what the asset, liabilities, and equities are called, and how you present those financial documents for people who are interested in going a step further. So other than that, I'm going to take you through a little bit more in depth of what we have within all of our trust documents. So our trust abstract is a shortened version of a trust document, and it leaves out certain details. And what it does is it provides proof that the trust has been established, and that this is the financial name, and it does that without revealing specifics that you want to keep private. So some people, the next thing is trust creation date. Some people have questions about what is the actual date, and there are many legal documents when you sign the trust name, they want you to add the creation date to the end of the trust name. So they consider the whole legal name of the trust, it's blankety blank trust, January 1st, 2019. So, and usually I put it just in brackets, I'll say 1/1/2019. So if you got an EIN number before you set up your trust indenture, then whatever information you put into requesting that EIN number, usually there's a month and a year, then you want to have a creation date matching that month and year that you gave on your EIN number request. If you sign your trust indenture or your trust abstract before you got an EIN number, you have a choice. You can use, hopefully you use that information on your EIN application, but if you didn't, now you have to decide, are you going to use the date that your original trust abstract was created, or the information that you put in your EIN? I'm hoping that that information was the same for you, because it makes life easier. If not, I usually recommend people go with the trust abstract date or the trust indenture date, and that's the date that you use. So anytime someone says trust creation date, that's what they're asking. They're asking, when was that document signed and funded? When was the document signed and funded? So that's what occurred on that date. Our memorandum of irrevocable trust, it's providing the name of the trust, the trustees, the date it was formed, and it also provides the substantiation of the property that's being held in trust. Our Schedule A, or our Addendum Schedule A, that is showing, it's written out, it has the title of the schedule. Usually it's personal property, or it can be real property. If you have foreign currency, that's going here. It has the trust name. It lists any additional details about personal property. It's dated. Whoever gave it, so if the grantor gave it, they sign it. If a beneficiary gave it, they sign it. If a trustee gave it, they sign it. And then the trustee signs it, receiving it into the trust. If there's any chance that this asset is going to get revalued, I highly recommend you get this document notarized. And if this addendum to Schedule A is included in your trust abstract, you're good to go. You had your signature notarized. You have memorialized when this event took place. So if there's any revaluation, it occurs inside your trust. And that's for various tax consequences. One person commented, overwhelmed but can see the light in tunnel. Excellent. That's the goal with the spreadsheet, is just to say, look, it's all in your hands. It is manageable. Breathe. You can do this. We can all do this, and we'll do it together. So if you have a full trust, what you have is the trust indenture is the contract that is the evidence of the creation of the trust. So this agreement shows that there is a contract between the settlor and the trustee, that the trustee will act for benefit of the beneficiaries. And it puts down the rules and responsibilities that everybody has to adhere to. And that trust indenture includes the settlor relinquishing any rights to the assets. So that's really, really important. Let's see. Any other questions real quick? Okay. Schedule C, the list of names of beneficiaries. I know that some people have intended humanitarian projects that haven't fully manifested yet. And they may have as beneficiary, they may simply say humanitarian projects. Eventually, you're going to want to know exactly who you're benefiting as your beneficiaries. So, and it's okay that you're holding space right now, because, how can I say this? There's no one who's going to challenge you on this information, but you are going to want to, as things progress, you're going to want to firm that up such that your register of beneficiaries has their name and their address and the units that they have, the units of beneficial interest that you have assigned. Remember, the units of beneficial interest does not dictate how you are divvying up the benefits that you give to beneficiaries. As a trustee, Randall has included language in our trust indenture that says the trustee may make choices about how to care for the beneficiaries. So even though one beneficiary may have one trust, a unit of beneficial interest, and another beneficiary has 10, as the trustee, your responsibility is to care for them. So if one beneficiary has a greater need than the other, you talk it over with the other trustee, and you care for your beneficiaries. You are not limited by the unit of beneficial interest that has been assigned. When the trust closes out, so that would be 21 years after the death of the last person in the trust indenture. So either 21 years after the grantor, the trustee can be replaced, life of the beneficiary. We can get clarification on how long the trust lasts, but it doesn't last forever. It does end. So at that point, the corpus of the trust would be divided up. If the trustees decide, it would be divided up and given to the beneficiaries. And at that point, that's when beneficial units may come in and impact things. But there is a tremendous amount of leeway for the trustees to care for the beneficiaries in the way that the trustees deem is most necessary. So that schedule of, or register of the units of beneficial interest, those certificates that we create, for right now, for me, I'm keeping mine private. I'm not letting my beneficiaries know. Further on in the future, there may be a reason to let someone know that they are a beneficiary of a trust, or perhaps you create a little mini trust, and it's a mini trust that cares for your family, and you would want family members to know that they have a trustee that they can go and talk to about a family issue. So in that regards, that may be a time that you want to let someone know. But the unit of beneficial interest, that certificate, it cannot be exchanged for anything. That is private information for the trustees until the trustees want to involve the beneficiaries into the fact that they are a part of the trust. And we walk through that slowly and carefully, depending upon the assets that we're managing and depending upon how we're caring for the beneficiaries. Does anyone have any questions regarding that? Let's see, someone asked, what's the proper procedure to transfer real estate to the trust, including getting the property registered with the county? So you're going to have to double check on tax consequences, but my understanding is there is a form that you can get from your county that asks to do a deed of transfer where you're trying to tell the county, hey, it's in my name. I'm just going to put in my trust name. There's no sale happening here. Sometimes the county will allow you just to write a letter explaining that you're just transferring the title of the asset, but there's no sale that actually occurred. And then they might charge you, I don't know, $100 processing fee. So check with your county recorder and they have it all the time because people are frequently putting their property into living trusts. So this is not a living trust. And the difference between a living trust and our trust, the living trust, the grantor and the trustee is the same. They're also the beneficiary until they die. When the grantor dies in a living trust, the living trust then becomes an irrevocable trust. So counties are very familiar with moving properties from a person's name into a trust name. And quite frequently, if you just ask someone, hey, I'm just doing, title name change, they'll do it just as a paperwork transaction, and you won't have to get anything like revalued or there won't be any tax consequence. But ask a lot of questions, and specifically ask your county, is there a tax consequence for me changing from my personal name to my trust name? Does that make sense? Hope that answers your question. Do we have any other questions regarding that? There is also a document that Randall included, which is a deed of transfer. And the deed of transfer can document when the grantor or settlor exchanges an asset into the trust. It can also document when there was an example at the very beginning where a beneficiary wanted to add into the assets of the trust. So you can use that document to help document what has occurred. And sometimes the deed of transfer is what you can use to go to the county and say, hey, this is the property, we want to transfer this property deed into the name of the trust. And you could present that document to the county and ask them, hey, can I file this with you? Is there going to be a tax consequence? Do you have any other form? It's usually a quick deed is what's used to change title. And it doesn't have very large fees that go along with it, like, I don't know, $50, $100. So that is the deed of transfer. And the deed of transfer, it can be used for anything. And just FYI, generally speaking, we do not put vehicles into our trust. We don't put vehicles into our trust because a vehicle has insurance on it and can end up in an accident. And if there was an accident, then the person could sue the trust. So we want to make sure whatever assets our trust is holding, that those assets don't have kind of odd liabilities. And if they do have some odd liabilities, we want to look at that. We want to insure against it because we're holding those assets for the beneficiary. Let's see.
On that topic,
Yes. Go right
is
ahead.
it okay to put, my plan was to put 3 vehicles into their own trust. Is that okay? Totally separate.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of people talk about whether, so if you put all 3 vehicles into one trust, and that was my plan too. I made, in my mind, I have a separate vehicle trust. I was going to actually have my trust do leases and have separate leases, because it's like you're trying to create roadblocks such that nobody, if there was an accident, nobody could get to other assets. So the worst case scenario, if you have all three vehicles in one trust, worst case scenario, there's a major event, someone would then sue the trust, and the limitation would be the assets that are in the trust. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I agree with you. I just think it's easier to manage, to have vehicles all in one place. And you'll have to decide whether you're going to own that vehicle, lease that vehicle. They all have different insurance and different liabilities that go about them. But I think that's an excellent idea.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure. So let's see. We've talked about the banking minutes. We've also, let's see, Randall also included in the whole trust package, we have banking resolution minute. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a separate banking resolution minute for any institution that my trust has an account with. So for example, you may be at a community bank and then you decide you want to hold an investment. You would do another banking resolution minute to list out the details of that second financial institution. So anytime you're doing any kind of banking, you can create a separate banking resolution minute. And previously, we should have had a short discussion about holding gold, holding the carat gold, and that currently you have to hold the carat gold as a individual live person because of the know your customer rules and regulations. And yet the trustee can be, a trust can be a beneficiary. I'm curious if you might hold it in that way and then do a board minute noting that the trust is the beneficiary of that asset, and perhaps create an income stream where the trust, it's a tricky thing. We're going to have to research that and share it with the group of the best way to hold the asset of gold within the trust. That's something to be researched for the future. I'm in agreement. Very good. So we've covered a whole lot of things, and the reason why I thought it would be good to have this meeting last 2 hours long was to give people an opportunity to bring more questions and have discussion with each other about how to handle different things. Because even though I have a lot of experience, I know how much I don't know, which is why I felt that this study group was a really important thing to do. So does anyone else have any? Oh, here we go. Can we open a bank account without having to give your social security number? That is a really good question. Right now, because of the know your customer rules that have been instigated due to all the terrorism or anyway, money laundering and all that fun stuff, I have not successfully found a bank that did not want my social security number. But when they asked for it, it was to identify me as a living person, not to report any income. Yeah, they're too scared. I agree. Right now, it's just the whole money laundering thing. Getting clean and clear certificates on what's happening with money is just really, really important. If you are unable to open the account because you may have chosen not to have an SS number, you might consider having an executive manager, and that executive manager might have an SS number, and they're the ones that will help with opening the account. So an executive manager works for the trustee. They are not a trustee, but they work for the trustee. And that may be a solution for you. It would have to be a trustworthy person that you felt you could delegate that to. To clarify, could I create a separate trust and put vehicles and lease into that trust? Yes, I would definitely do a separate trust. And we can, this is one question that I'm going to write down and have Randall clarify more for us, and we'll also be reading it in the Passing the Buck books. But my understanding is you can have a sort of like management trust, and then that management trust can have little trusts underneath it. So I would make the vehicle trust a beneficiary of my management trust. And I would have the vehicle trust all by itself, but it happens to be a beneficiary of a management trust. Does that seem clear? So I'll ask Randall to talk to us more about management trust and having vehicles in a separate trust. And a really important thing for everyone to know, the more we read and ask questions, the more knowledge comes to us, because it's the asking of the questions that pulls the knowledge from the universe. And I don't know how you all map the world, but in my limited experience of about 54 years, I have found that answers may come from many different places, but the more questions I ask, the more knowledge I receive. So I just want to encourage everyone, keep a pad of paper with you and just keep asking questions. We have another question. What is the proper procedure to transfer real estate to a trust, including getting the property registered with the county? Oh, Shirley, did we answer that question already for you? Are you good with that? Oh, no worries, no worries. But are you good, Shirley? Does that feel good? So you're going to ask your county some questions. So you're asking, since these trusts work worldwide, how would one go about transferring property that's located in a different country? Very good question. So what you would need to do is, in whatever country the real estate is in, you need to ask that recording government entity, is it okay for someone that's a non-resident? Just ask general questions. Someone who's non-resident, can they own property in this country? So that's the first question. Can a non-resident? Because right now your trust is someplace else, not in the other country, right? So then once you find out, oh yeah, we allow non-resident people, or we allow people from other countries, they're allowed to own property. As long as a person can own property in another country, most likely a trust will be able to. So that's the first question, is simply to find out from that country. You can probably Google for the most part and find a lot of these answers just in general. And you can also contact a real estate agent of the country where you want your trust to own property. And you can ask a real estate agent, hey, can someone else own? So that's the beginning question. So once you find that out, then you find out how are the property titles held, where are they recorded, and you'll want to make sure that whatever documents are used to record a property deed, that those are the documents that the trust will be using. Let's see. Shirley, does that help you out with that question? Awesome. We have another question. What do the schedules refer to on the trust financial letter? I'm not finding all these schedules in my complete trust. Okay, so very quick, for the people who came late, I love accounting. That's my gig, that's my thing. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. So your entity, your trust, has been birthed. And when you look at the finances of your trust, if you filled out a Schedule A, say you only had $21, your trust now owns as an asset. It owns $21. And if your trust doesn't owe anyone, it has equity of $21. So what this financial spreadsheet is trying to do for you is to create little buckets. And you can add your own buckets. You can relabel. It's trying to say, this is the income coming in, or this is the asset coming in. This is the total assets, what's happening. And then listing out if you have expenses, listing notes if you paid something for your beneficiaries, and helping you see the entire picture, because accounting is always in balance. Your assets equal your liability plus your equity. If you have zero liability, then your asset and your equity are the same number. So that's what that financial schedule is all about. It's taking off from Randall's trust manual. So we have our Schedule A, that is personal property. We have our Schedule B, that is real property, like a land. We have our Schedule C, which is our beneficiaries, our units of beneficial interest. These are the people or the entities that we're benefiting. The next thing we have is our trust at some point is going to have to be making income. It has to stand on its own. So we're going to have income coming into our trust, and we'll all work out how we're going to do that, and hopefully we get beautiful funding and lots of good things. So we are going to have income. We're going to have expenses. Taking the income and expenses, when you take your income and you subtract out the expenses, that leaves you with your net assets. So that financial ledger is trying to tell you, here's your activity that you're going to reflect in your trust minutes at least once a year, if not possibly twice a year. So these logs are meant to help you control the activities that you're taking on. If you're staying dormant for a while, not a problem, perfectly fine. But you're holding space for all the activities of your trust so that you can easily have a meeting and do your minutes. So does that help understand the trust financial ledger? I have taken off from where Randall is, and because of my knowledge of businesses, I've had C Corps, S Corps, LLCs, nonprofits, trust. I am a trustee. Because of my financial background and I adore accounting, I wanted you all to have something super, super easy that you could handle the activity of your trust. I hope you find that helpful. And we reviewed everything in the trust financial ledger at the beginning of this session, so you'll be able to re-listen to it, and it'll walk you through each of the columns. There's a question, at what point do we have to open trust bank accounts? You mentioned trust not being active until it's funded, starting with $21. So as soon as some trusts, they used to fund with a silver dollar. That used to be the way that trusts were funded. They just had a silver dollar. So you want to open a trust banking account when you're ready to have activity with your trust. So some people are preparing for hopeful future event where humanitarian funds will come in, and some people are opening like a holding account at a bank. We'll see what happens. We're all praying for a wonderful thing to happen very quickly. So in prep for that, some people have opened accounts, some people have chosen not to. Some people don't want to stir the waters at all that they even exist until humanitarian funding is available. So it's your choice as to when you decide you want to open an account, but your trust can't really get active in helping out the beneficiaries until you have some sort of account where you're tracking the financial activity of what you're doing for your beneficiaries. There's a question, the trust document log different than the trust financial ledger? Yes. So the document log is simply tracking what's in your binder. So when Randall gives you the whole entire trust indenture, he recommends separating it out into 5 sections. And I agree with him. It works really well for staying organized. So your first section is your trust indenture. Your second section is appointments and schedules. So appointments and schedules is you've appointed a trustee. You've appointed a second trustee. Maybe you've appointed a protector. Maybe you've appointed an executive manager. Those all go in the second section. And your schedules. You have a Schedule A, Schedule B, Schedule C, Schedule D. Any of your schedules can go here. Then the bank paperwork, with every bank you have or every financial institution that you have, you will have a set of paperwork that goes together with that account, and that can be held in your section 3. Then your section 4 is addendums. So you will have addendums to your schedules. You will even have trust amendments where you are clarifying things for the future operation. You will never deviate from the intent of your trust indenture, but you will have things where you go, wow, I really like how this person described this responsibility. And you'll write up an amendment that helps clarify it so that the next person who steps in as trustee knows, oh yeah, do it that way. So that goes in section 4. And then section 5 is really the most important, your board minutes. Your board minutes are tracking the activities that you're engaging in as a trustee. So that's how the trust document log is different than the financial ledger. The financial ledger is watching your asset come in, it's watching your income in, it's watching your expenses go out, and it's watching the money, how you're caring for your beneficiary. Another question, does that mean that it would be a good idea to open a trust account and put only a small amount of money in while waiting for the exchange to happen? That's what I've done, and that's what I know a lot of people have done. You're going to have to decide for yourself. I haven't quite cracked the whole tax nut, and we can speak to Randall some more about that. But it's really, we're all engaging in a beautiful endeavor that some people have had this trust for years, and they're using it with LLCs, they're using it with maybe 508 ministries or 501 or 501c3 nonprofits. There's lots of different ways that this trust is being used in the world. In regards to tax consequences of opening an account, what I did was I opened an account that is a non-interest bearing account. So I have opened up a small account. I put in $300. It's in a local bank, and it's a non-interest bearing account. So it's not going to, in my mind, it's not going to cause ripples anywhere. There's no 1099 being sent to the IRS. There's no, it's just a real simple way for me to begin the gentle activities of my trust. So I hope that answers your question. Marion, and excellent, excellent, excellent. So are there any other questions that people have? Because I have pretty well gotten to the end of my list. And just to summarize very quickly for you, once again, the spreadsheet that I sent to everyone, it has a document log. It says sheet 1. That was me just saying hello to everyone. I was testing the screen. Oh, actually, you may not have that. That was on my computer. It has a trust financial ledger. Then I also have notes, and these notes are the notes that I've been speaking to for this whole meeting. So if you didn't catch something, or if I didn't say something very clearly, you can go check on this note page, and I've tried to type out some things for you as well. The next tab is useful software. If you are a computer geek like I am, these are some of the different programs that I've used for different reasons. I actually publish an almanac once a year, so I use Adobe Suites, and I like having a fax that comes to my phone, so I use Fax Burner. E-checks, I'm using electronic checks in one of the nonprofits that I'm working with, and I really like how that's working. Instead of having a checkbook, it's you actually print a check. It's I really like that. The legal forms that I use, I frequently will go on Law Depot and look at their forms, or I'll use Business in a Box and I'll pull up forms. So basically, anytime that you want to take an action with your trust and you're not sure how to go about doing it, just Google, just look up, how to trust do blank. And there's a whole lot of information out there to help us in caring for our trust. Someone else asked a question. If the trust gets a 1099 or other tax form, how do we deal with it? Ignore it? Good question. I'm not a tax lawyer and I'm not a CPA. So we're all going to be walking through this together. Yeah, we'll have to decide if we all want to share what's happening for each other individually. But me personally, I'm trying to do stuff in a way that the trust that I manage funds the whole war machine as little as possible. So I don't know. I do not know the answer to your question. We're going to have to walk through that one together. Someone else asks, if the RV comes through, I'm expecting to hire a bookkeeper and eventually many bookkeepers to log project expenses in the ledger. Can QuickBooks Online? Absolutely. So my intention with this spreadsheet, you could have someone doing a whole lot of stuff with QuickBooks and everything, give you a summary. You could enter in one line. You could say, gosh, the expenditures for the month of January were, 200,000, and it went this, 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 and this. But this spreadsheet would give you personally, as a trustee, a very simple tool so that you have your hands on the reins and you know what's going on. You never, as a trustee, you never want to lose holding the reins. You may delegate things to people, but you need that information to come back to you. And you need to devise a way, if you don't use a spreadsheet, find something. You need to devise a way that you are holding on to the reins of your trust, that you are responsible for it and you are managing it. So absolutely, QuickBooks is great. And it makes it nice because you can reconcile your accounts. It's a very easy way to double check transactions. Absolutely. But that information can be summarized and given to you. And there's still a way that you can make use of this table, even just with a 1 or 2 line entry, summarizing the information. So you're able to report to the other trustees, hey, this is what happened this month. I hope that answers your question in regards to QuickBooks. And we have another question. Can I invite my trustee to be on these webinars? Absolutely. The goal is to have, and with great respect, to only have the people who have purchased the trust from Randall. This is a study group where we are lovingly trying to do our due diligence so that Randall, as our mentor of our trust, we can ask him really important questions that he can help us clarify, and we can go to the books and find answers. But the idea is that the trustees that are involved in your trust that you got from Randall, yes, I would love for them to be a part of this call, because we want to learn from each other and we want to be educated. We can't have, it will not serve us if we have trustees that are not educated, because they will not be able to properly protect the assets and properly serve the beneficiaries. That's my soapbox. Any other questions? Sweet. So I move to adjourn us early. If there's no one in disagreement and there's no other questions, then we will most gratefully call an end to this very first trust study group session. Great. Thank you everyone for joining. And I believe next Wednesday at 4 p.m., Randall will be hosting his monthly seminar, and I'm not sure which topics he's taken up, but he was really excited about what he's going to be offering. So I hope you will all be on the call with Brilliance and Commerce for Randall's Trust seminar next Wednesday. And I wish you all to have a beautiful week. Blessings to everyone. Thank you.